think beyond traditional business banking. Think a partner that gives you in-depth financial insights.
If you have just tuned in, you are watching the Power Table, and the topic of the discussion today is powering Africa. So you would know by now that more than half of the citizens on this continent, around 600 million people in Africa, do not have access to reliable power still. And while there has been several interventions to try and alleviate this and fix this, a lot of the interventions are not happening fast enough. So with the transition to renewables and a just energy transition, as it were, we're asking how this transition can help potentially fast track the access of power for Africans in Africa. We're also looking at what the opportunities of investing in Africa's energy sector are right now and how the right kind of policy can light up further capital flows. I spoke with the Deputy Minister of Energy from Ghana, Minister Andrew Mercer, about his view on this topic, and this is what he had to say.
I've always believed that Africa Oil Weeks offers us a platform where we can strategize, share ideas, and see how we can, have some more energy penetration in Africa, because there's a lot of energy poverty. And consistent with my expectation over the past 2 days, those are the conversations I'll be having, how we transition in a manner that then ensures that we have energy security, fill the poverty gap that is in Africa, how we can leverage investment to fund, infrastructure, transportation, exploration, and all that. So it's been pretty engaging, useful in the past 2 days. Yeah.
Some would say that it's easier said than done. Just that transition to a cleaner way of doing business, while securing sufficient energy power and alleviating energy poverty on the continent. Would you agree with that statement, or do you think it's as easy as is said as is done?
Well, it depends on who is defining the narrative. If it's the West, then it's easier said than done. But if it's Africa, then I believe that we ought to look at the realities on the ground and define our own pathway towards transition. Because bear in mind that in the first place, there's no energy in Africa for you to transition. There's a lot of energy poverty in Africa. So you need to look at what it is that your people need, how you are able to fund that, and then begin to transition. Yes, that said, because there's new technology, there's new ways of doing things, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go through the process of burning fossil to transition. You can use new technology to do that. But how do you fund that? Because the commitments that the West have made, they've breached all of them. And so it's important for us Africans to then look for the resources to fund the transition. And how better to look for the resources than to exploit already existing resources to generate the revenue, to develop, and then fund our transition. And so for us, it's our reality that is determining the kind of narrative that we have in energy security, energy poverty improvement in that regard is what is setting the pace for the discourse that we're having as Africans. So as we look to the broader theme that does speak to maximizing the natural resources on the continent, as for Ghana, what is your plan to maximize some of your energy deposits and your pitch essentially to some of the investors who are here? What is your message to them about how they can participate? Well, thankfully, we're a proven oil producing country. We have 3 producing fields. It's well established that we have huge deposits of hydrocarbon gas, which we have in our energy transition framework that was launched at COP26, I believe, by our president. And this year is launched the investment document that is, we're looking to raise the resources to fund our transition. That clearly tells us what it is that we need to do to enable us to get there. And clearly, because we have huge deposits of gas, our plan is to explore that resource and use the revenue that we generate from there to transition. And so there's huge opportunities in the space. There are open acreages in Ghana, and we're looking to engage with our existing partners and new partners in the space. We have a very fantastic investment climate. Fiscal terms are very competitive, and we're encouraging private sector players, majors, independents to come and have a conversation with us. We have a Ghana Spotlight event today that we're inviting people to attend to look at what it is that is in Ghana and to encourage them to come.
One of the sessions that you did mention that you were speaking on was a session dedicated to gas and also how best the continent can maximize or monetize its gas deposits. In terms of your intervention and the strategy for Ghana, what does that look like?
So we're looking at gas for power generation, non-power industrial use, commercial use, and of course household use. Okay. Presently, about 80-90% of our gas is used for power production. We've moved significantly away from fossil-dependent fuel to power plants. Most of our power plants are dependent on gas. So there's already a developed gas market in Ghana. We're building pipelines to ensure that industrial consumers also have access to gas so we can move away from fossil-dependent fuels in that space. So we're developing a gas pipeline enclave, low-pressure pipeline enclave in the Tema industrial hub of Ghana. We're also deepening our LPG usage. We're looking at transportation, gas, CNG, filling stations and all that. So there's a huge program in commercializing our gas, creating a gas market in Ghana. We reviewed our gas master plan to ensure that that's consistent with our transition objectives, to ensure that we use more of gas, which is a cleaner fuel, than fossil. And that's exactly what it is that we're doing presently.
Some private sector players that we've spoken to have spoken about some of the infrastructure challenges that are limiting them from doing more in Africa's resources space. I mean, talking about interventions that need to be made by government when we look at the transmission lines. And also, broadly speaking, if we just talk about interventions that need to be made on refining capacity on the continent to reduce our level of reliance on imports whose prices that we don't control. How is Ghana thinking about investments in that infrastructure space right now?
Yes, we are. Indeed, as we speak, we have only one gas processing plant that does 150 million scf per day. Our national gas company has contracted private sector team to put up a 300 million scf per day plant. Okay. Beyond that, we've launched our petroleum hub project, which is looking to develop a petroleum and petrochemical hub in the western region of Ghana. Okay, and that has been launched. Investment drive is ongoing. We're looking to build a pipeline between the west and the east. There's already an offshore pipeline, a reverse flow through the West African gas pipeline that transports excess gas from the west to the east. But of course, we cannot use that for industrialization. Okay, so we're creating an onshore pipeline between Takoradi and Tema to, and of course, create industrial hubs along the pipeline right of way. Okay, to ensure that we deepen industrial consumption of gas. So there's a lot of opportunities in the midstream space, infrastructure. Government policy is being rolled out to ensure that the private sector can take advantage of the existing policy to make investments in that regard. So we're working actively to ensure that that happens.
Yeah. So when we talk about the private sector, another key point that has come out is the importance of ensuring that the local players are able to participate across the value chains. I mean, the oil and gas industry, you're talking about probably big monies and big investments that need to be made. While that is well understood, what is also asked for is the increase or further participation of local players. So let's just talk about localization and bringing in some of the local players in the value chain.
Absolutely. But we've taken localization, local content a step further.
Sure.
Because what we realized was that even though we have local content rules in place, some foreign entities still use Ghanaians to front for investments. And so the benefits that the local content rules is intended to generate for indigenous Ghanaians was taken away. And so what we've then gone ahead to say is that we're doing Ghanaian content and Ghanaian participation. And that has to be indigenous Ghanaians who then are the ones that are playing a front role in that regard. So our local content rules are very clear. We've moved away from joint venture partnerships into strategic alliances and strategic channel partnerships to ensure that we deepen Ghanaian participation in the space. Yes. So whilst we recognize foreign direct investment, we believe that the resource that is being explored ought to benefit indigenous as well. So we put in clear rules under our local content policy to ensure that that happens. And so far, it's working very, very well. We're actually having a local content conference next month where we bring Ghanaian local content suppliers with the upstream players, try and do some matchmaking to, get them to engage Ghanaians in that regard. We have rules that then require them to submit their procurement plans to the regulator, who then specifically directs them to engage Ghanaians, of course, who have competences, to partner with them to deliver services in the upstream space. So our local content rules are very clear in that regard. Yeah.
And I'd just like to know, there's a lot of players at this conference from across the continent. As we talk about securing or alleviating energy poverty, it most certainly will likely have to be a collaborative effort. What kind of partnerships are you thinking of potentially entering in future, or are partnerships that potentially could be on the table right now with other players in the region?
Well, I guess that South-South cooperation is always the way to go. How we work amongst ourselves as Africans, how we collaborate as Africans and not always look to the West, because oftentimes when their circumstances determine, then of course they change the narrative. Recall that prior to Russia-Ukraine, there was clear talk of an accelerated move away from fossil fuel, into cleaner energy sources. Funding for even oil exploration was an issue until Russia struck, and it became apparent to everybody that energy security was much more important than energy transition. And so you've seen a clear departure from what it is that they sought to do prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine into a new thinking of still dependent on fossil to ensure their energy security. So we have to work together as Africans to ensure that we are not left, in the cold when the West decides to change its mind. And so on the subcontinent of West Africa, we're working closely with our neighbors, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Togo, Benin. In fact, there's a pipeline that transports Nigerian gas to Ghana. The expectation is that we'll get some investment to move it further up north, so that the entire West African market can benefit from the shared resources, shared infrastructure to ensure that energy security, energy poverty is as much as possible eliminated within the West African sub-region. I believe that we need to expand that scope so that we can work with our other brothers on the continent to ensure that that's happening. Yesterday, on Monday, in our interactions at the ministerial level, that was something that came up quite strongly.
Sure.
The need to collaborate amongst ourselves, not compete. Competition is good, brings out the best in people, but we need to be more collaborative in our engagement. I believe that that is the way to go, and we need to put our minds to it and focus more on platforms like this to ensure that we're able to achieve that.
And adding to those points is Zimbabwe. Of course, it is home to some of the largest platinum group metals in the world. Right now, there's a whole lot of lithium also in the country, a mineral that's critical to the energy transition. But like in most parts of the continent, energy poverty is still pretty rife. I then spoke to Zimbabwe's Deputy Minister of Mines, Minister Kambamura, about the country's broader strategy to power the country as well as the continent. This is what he had to say.
The problem that we have in Africa, especially in the energy sector, is not mainly availability, but accessibility as well. In my country, we have a lot of resource. We have a lot of skilled manpower, but what we lack is capital. So over the past few years, government has been working to try and attract capital so that we get investors who can invest in the energy sector. We've been trying to come up with the policies that de-risks the country, policies that address the liquidity aspects, policies that address, make sure investors get their returns in time, the rate of return. So those policies have been working well, and we have seen a lot of investors come into the country after pronouncement of those policies. Like I've said, we have a large resource that is waiting to be explored and exploited for the benefit of the country. In the northern part of the country, we have one of the biggest core assets on the continent, and government is working on to partner some investors in order to explore and exploit for the benefit of the country. What we are calling for currently as government is a local value addition and a beneficiation of our energy minerals before export. I initially spoke on accessibility of energy to our people. As much as we want to build infrastructure for the energy sector, most parts of our country remains inaccessible due to several factors that include infrastructure. So we still need investment in those areas. You find government has tried electrifying rural areas, but you find that in most cases, people can only afford to use electricity for lighting and revert back to use of firewood, paraffin, to cook and do other domestic duties. So there's still a lot to be done in order to meet our vision of attaining an empowered upper middle income economy by the year 2030.
If we stick to the challenge then that you have raised, that of accessibility, not necessarily availability, it is interesting to hear you say that some investors have responded positively to some of the policy reform over in Zimbabwe of late, and that they have come in and they've come to put money in the country. I'd like to just tackle a sore point, because we do often speak to several investors on CNBC Africa, and many who have watched the recent elections in Zimbabwe who are concerned about the policy environment, and we know that policy does stimulate investment. To those investors who are still concerned about policy, who might want to participate in the opportunity to increase accessibility, what do you say to them about the safety of their money in your country, sir?
Number one, for investors who want to make good money, especially now, the right destination is Zimbabwe. For investors who want to see their money multiplying, safe, and also their tenure secured, they should come to Zimbabwe. The issue of election has gone past, and nothing has changed in terms of policy, right? The policy framework that the Second Republic brought in 2018 is continued to improve with the timeless policy intervention from the first office, where the political will from the highest office, you usually see things moving. And there's a lot of opportunities as I speak in my country. Opportunities to finance energy infrastructure, opportunities to do exploration and also exploit gas and other hydrocarbons, including lithium, which is an energy mineral. So those opportunities are many.
Sure.
So Zimbabwe is also, that policy where any investor wants to negotiate, deals over an asset or whatever mining title or beneficiary issues is free to engage with the Minister of Mines or even the President, the highest office. He said Zimbabwe is open for business. And we are open for business. If we are open for business, we cannot close doors to investors who wants to negotiate maybe in terms of tax policy, in terms of beneficiary issues, and so forth. So, like I said in the beginning, the best time to invest in Zimbabwe is now.
Sure.
Because the country, is trying to leverage on our current resources so that we build our economy as we move forward. The President's vision to attain an empowered upper middle income economy come 2030. So
not only is policy a point that some investors are debating in their heads, we are still coming from the recovery from the pandemic, and we have seen inflation running like wildfire across the world. But in Zimbabwe, the challenges around inflation and price stability predate that of the pandemic. We've seen interest rates also increasing quite considerably, making financing projects a lot more expensive. So for investors who've got concerns around liquidity in your country right now, what is your message to them?
Government is taking an interest in coming out with the policies to make sure, capital, from investors is liquid. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has come up with a plethora of policies, to make sure that the rate of return on investment is improved, and also that, people bring their capital to Zimbabwe, they can get, cash out of that. We've come up with the issue of gold coins. We've come up with issue of revenue being stored in if investors are to pay their royalties, government accepted them to pay in terms of physical mineral. For example, gold, you can pay 2.5% of that gold in form of gold physical form and 2.5% as cash. So those policies have seen a lot of investors having appetite to come and invest in the country, and at the same time it's given government a chance to build on our mineral reserves to back our currency.
Carbon trading is something that's picking up on the continent as well, as the whole world is looking at ways to lower carbon emissions while still doing business. And I know that this is an industry in Zimbabwe that is also being developed further. So just maybe some thoughts on the carbon trading strategy that Zimbabwe is following.
For us to decarbonize, we need to leverage on our current resources so that we can be able, to build on renewable energy. So government has come up with a strong approach on that, especially on the issue of local validation and beneficiation, so that we can get money as a country to build on renewable energy. So these issues that I've been talking about exploration of our hydrocarbons, exploration in the lithium sector, are some of the steps that government is doing to try and decarbonize. We cannot talk of decarbonization when we are not stepping on somewhere. So we have to step on what we have. We explore, we exploit what we have to get money so that we can be able to set our pace on the issue of greener energy.
I had a conversation with the Deputy Minister of Ghana earlier on, and I was speaking to the Deputy Minister about the broader issue of powering the continent and reducing energy poverty. And I said, you've got more than half of people in Africa right now that don't have access to electricity. He did outline that in the case of Ghana, I mean, they have an electrification rate of over 80%. So a lot more citizens in Ghana do have access to power. But the picture on the continent as a whole is one that is problematic. I asked him about collaboration and collaborating with other countries in the region to alleviate this. He said it was, of course, it had to happen in this manner. Just your thoughts on collaboration and maybe the partners that Zimbabwe is looking to work with in alleviating the broader challenge of energy poverty.
Firstly, Zimbabwe cannot be an island. That is to say, we cannot be isolated from views of other countries or views of countries in our region. Government, like I've said, has come up with policies that meet regional and international standards, so that we have investors who have invested in other countries coming to invest in Zimbabwe on the same platform. We are also working with South Africa in the strategy to improve our infrastructure, especially in railroad infrastructure. We've also seen some investors coming from other countries to we are eager to fund projects to do with infrastructure building and exploration for minerals. So we are open for partnerships. Government has also come with policies to attract investment in boot agreement, BOT, build, operate and transfer, build, own, operate and transfer agreement. So there's a lot of activity that is going on, especially in the renewable energy sector.
And the investors that you are targeting right now, what should they keep top of mind? What should they be aware of in terms of how you are wanting to bring fresh capital in the country, but also for the betterment of everyone? So essentially I'm talking about localization and ensuring that the business strategy that is followed is a lot more inclusive, particularly of small businesses. What's the ask from government there? What is the ask from government for investors, particularly foreign investors, regarding localization and where Zimbabwe stands in localization and integrating local content in the value chain? Okay.
Number one, investors who are coming to Zimbabwe should be prepared to locally evaluate and beneficiate minerals before export. They should also consider issues to do with corporate social responsibility, adhere to environmental laws. Our resources should benefit the communities in which those resources are being found. And also, above all, government is open for any discussion over some bottlenecks which the investor would have noticed. And like I've said, government is open for discussion, and Zimbabwe is open for business. So every investor that is eager to come to Zimbabwe is assured of security of tenure, is assured of liquidity aspects, and also making sure that his capital is safe, is in safe hands. You have touched on the issue of accessibility of energy in rural areas and other sectors of the economy, or of the economy, I mean. We've again opened the doors for investment in that sector. Government has come up with a rural electrification program where we are intending to see 80% of our rural communities electrified come 2028.
Okay. Last question on beneficiation. Do you have the manufacturing capability, the infrastructure in your country to beneficiate at the desired target that you wish? Do you have the skills that are necessary to be in that process of adding value to your inputs? And if there is a shortage therein, What is government's view on whose responsibility it is to address that?
We do have the resource. We do have skilled manpower. But what we lack currently is capital. So 2 years ago, government banned the export of raw mineral ores. Minerals like chrome, minerals like lithium, minerals like manganese. After the ban, we saw some investors coming to build beneficiation plants. We've seen chrome smelters being set up in the country, and there's another company which is building Africa's largest integrated steel plant in Zimbabwe to exploit our iron ore resources and supporting minerals. So we've seen positive results after banning the export of raw minerals, and what we currently need are more beneficiation facilities in the country, and we're looking for investors who can build those facilities along the value chain.
Think beyond traditional business banking. Think a partner that gives you in-depth financial insights.